This is the new SEC.
Welcome to the new SEC podcast. I'm Randall Ledet Jr. We got Hunter Eastman here. Episode 24, Week 12 preview. We've been coming at you for the last 12 weeks, and we're excited to talk about Week 12 and what's upcoming. In this episode, we're going to talk about the top games in the SEC, some of the tune-up games really quickly, and give you our typical around the country segment, talking about all the top games in the Power 4 conferences and the G5 when it comes to that G5 playoff spot as well. And so, Hunter, another week of college football.
Yep.
As I always say, how we feeling?
Feeling good. It's another week of the SEC having the game of the week, College Game Day, going to Tennessee at Georgia, the only ranked-on-ranked matchup. But there's a couple good games in the conference, out of the conference. I feel like every time we mention the SEC games, then I have to throw BYU's game in there because it's always going to be a dogfight for them. But there's some good games this week. Tennessee and Georgia headlining it, though.
Tennessee and Georgia are definitely headlining it. Like you said, the only ranked-on-ranked matchup as it stands today when it comes to the rankings that are out now and what will be coming out. Missouri, South Carolina should be a pretty interesting one. We get the rivalry game in Texas versus Arkansas. Texas heading down to Fayetteville. Across the country, we also have some other top games. Utah's taking on Colorado. So Utah was in a dogfight last week against BYU, and then Colorado gets to face this Utah team that's still hungry for their second Big 12 win. In the ACC, Clemson's taking on Pitt as well, but this is about the SEC, as we always say. And so when we're looking at some of the other games that are in the conference, there's 4 teams that are playing some tune-up games. Anything to watch for in those games with A&M and Alabama and Auburn and the likes?
I think there's some eyes to keep on the Alabama game. We were talking about it a little bit. It's going to be a game that I think Alabama will take handedly, but it's not a Mercer team that you can kind of sweep under the rug and slide by. They are one of the top 10 teams in FCS ball, one of the best defenses in that side of college football. Number 1 in FCS for run defense, number 1 in getting interceptions off of opponents. So Alabama could have a slower start in this game. It'll not just because I'm an Alabama fan, it could be one to keep on a side screen, see what's going on over there.
Yeah, definitely could be one to keep on the side screen. And we had talked about it. Alabama's coming off 2 pretty big wins with Missouri and LSU last week. So, ideally they don't come out, sleeping if you are an Alabama fan. If you're not an Alabama fan, you hope they come out sleeping.
Yeah.
Auburn's taking on UL Monroe. So Auburn right now sitting 14th in the conference. This would be a good win for them to notch on the season. Add to the win column. Kentucky's taking on Murray State, 15th in the conference right now. And A&M, sometimes these group of 5 games can be close for them. We saw the Bowling Green game earlier in the season from a G5 perspective. So this one could be interesting.
Yeah, it could be. And A&M coming off of a bye, they are in a spot where they kind of control their destiny a little bit with only the 1 SEC loss. They play Texas later this year. ESPN's percentages for making the playoffs not showing them a whole lot of love. I think they're just under 15% from ESPN standpoint. But if they win out, they're finding themselves in a good spot to play for the SEC championship game. So I expect them to have worked on some things in bye week, seeing what happened around the conference and using this as a game to get ready for the games that they have coming up.
Definitely. It feels odd not talking about Marcel Reed here. Every week we talk about him or Connor Wegman, but mostly Marcel. So he'll be back in the talks. And, A&M fans, you guys love to watch our show. So always appreciate the support. In terms of the major games, I call them like the SEC stack rankings games. We got 4 games we're previewing today here on the SEC podcast. And so if you haven't subscribed yet and you listen to this right now, please subscribe. Make it a lot easier for you to find content like this. But for the 4 games that we're going to be covering here today, Tennessee versus Georgia, ranked on ranked matchup. We talked about it. Missouri right now is ranked. Once the poll comes out on Tuesday, we're recording here on Monday. We'll see where they'll be at. But they're taking on South Carolina. Hunter, you've been kind of hot on the ranked South Carolina already trained. Carolina boy yourself.
Yeah.
And then Texas is taking on Arkansas, return of the rivalry game. What does this mean for Sam Pittman and how important is this for Arkansas? And what should we expect from this Texas offense that came off of a stellar performance last week against Florida? And then LSU taking on Florida. This game has got much different stipulations for LSU than they thought, but still an important game nonetheless in the Brian Kelly era for what a lot of people would think and say.
Yeah. Any of these games could go any way. They're all exciting. I think it's interesting to see tomorrow on Tuesday when the CFP poll comes out where they put these teams, because it could even have bigger implications come Saturday, depending on where they put Missouri and South Carolina. Texas will likely be at that 3 spot. LSU will probably be kind of on the back end to dropping out of the rankings altogether in the 20s. So this would be one to keep them in if they can pull it out in Gainesville.
Yeah, it definitely would be a huge one for them to keep them in the rankings. And right now, when it comes to the AP, SEC has 9 ranked teams. I think all the top 9 teams in the conference are all ranked. And so that speaks a lot to what the teams have done out of conference. It speaks a lot to what the teams have done in conference, beating each other up. And, talking about teams beating each other up, this is a key rivalry in the SEC, a classic SEC East matchup. Georgia, Tennessee, like you said, College Game Day is going there in Athens, Georgia, where the games be played. The over-under is 48.5. The spread's Georgia's favored by 9 for the spread. What are your initial thoughts for this early look at the game?
Yeah, this is a rivalry of sorts. Georgia won the last 7, 12 of the last 15. So a rivalry in a way, but Georgia's definitely the favored team here and the one that usually gets it their way. They get the benefit of playing at home. Georgia's schedule, and Kirby Smart's brought it up. I've seen Georgia fans everywhere talking about it. SEC must hate them for what they've done with their road schedule, making them play at Alabama, at Texas, at Ole Miss. Like, finally they get one at home here to sweeten the resume and keep them in the top 12 if they can pull this one out. It's definitely going to be better for them playing this one at home.
Yeah, I think that's going to be one of the major deciders in how this game goes with Georgia playing at home. But the home advantage is one of the only advantages some could say for Georgia if we're looking at the tail of the tape and the stats for Tennessee and what they bring. We talked about it kind of before we started recording here. Really, for Tennessee, the story's been the defense. This defense right now has held every team to under 20 points this season. On the offensive side, Georgia's going to have a really tough test slowing down Dylan Sampson. He's rushed for over 112 yards in the last 5 games, with 112 yards being his lowest performance. And it's a tough test for this Georgia rushing defense, who is pretty impressive. But when we look at what they're going to have to do to beat Tennessee, that's going to be a huge piece.
Yeah. And I think for this one, Tennessee's offense has been a little bit more one-dimensional. And it could bode well for Georgia that they don't have to play a complete defensive game to win this. Like, it is stopping Dylan Sampson, but when Tennessee lost to Arkansas, they ran well in that game. Like, Dylan Sampson still had a good game, and they lost, only scoring 14 points. So if you're Georgia, you might have a little bit of an opportunity to not let him run, but if he runs fine, as long as you're shutting down the passing attack, you could slow down some drives. So I think that's the focus for them. If Nico comes into this game healthy, he's expected to play. Left the game last week with an upper body injury, so we'll see where what happens. But assuming he plays and they can shut him down, that I think is the key for Georgia defensively. And then I think for Georgia, if they could improve on the running game, or really improve in the passing game, like the offense right now is pretty stagnant for Georgia. On that flip side of the ball, where I don't want to put it all on Carson Beck because we've given him enough. We've talked about him enough over the past few episodes in the past few weeks, and I've seen it a lot online, like a lot of criticism for him. But watching that last game, I wouldn't say it was all his fault. They're asking a lot of him. They're throwing the ball about 61% of the time, a little over that. And the O-line play was pretty poor. The running game didn't really get going at all against Ole Miss. So in here, you have to wonder if Georgia brings something different to the table with him, does some adjustments to the O-line. I don't think that Tennessee will be putting as much pressure as Ole Miss did. I know Tennessee's defense has done that in the past, but not to Ole Miss's caliber. So it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, it'll definitely be interesting to see. And you talked about putting a lot of pressure on Carson Beck. This rushing attack for Georgia has been led by, Trevor Etienne, as well as Branson Robinson and Nate Frazier. Nate Frazier has about 75 carries in the season, and Etienne leads the team about 92 carries. And so if that tandem can do more in this game, that's going to be huge for them controlling time and possession against this tough Tennessee defense.
Yeah, it will be. And it'll be interesting to see if they can get it going. I think that they will be able to. I think that what they're going to try to do in this game, you're at home. I think that as a home team, Georgia's built to hang on to a lead.
Absolutely. And I agree with you there, only because that's not what Tennessee has shown us that much this season when it comes to the offense driving down and kind of having that game-winning touchdown. I feel like you, Georgia's offensive home field advantage plays a role here in their success in this game. I think this game is very similar to the Tennessee Alabama scoring perspective, the 24-17, but I have Georgia winning this one 24-17. The under is the number for me here. And then, ultimately that Georgia does not cover.
Okay. I like Georgia covering here. I got them 27-17. I think that Dylan Sampson still has a good game, like I mentioned earlier, but it just won't be enough. I think that there's going to be some adjustments to bet this week. I know I've seen fans calling for Rashada or Gunnar Stockton. I don't think that anyone knows better than what the Georgia's coaching staff is doing. And I wouldn't want to be a team playing Kirby Smart coming off of a loss. He's a great coach coming off of a loss. I think that they'll be snapped back to a better performing team than what we saw from them last week.
Definitely. I 100% agree with you. I think with Georgia's season being on the line, I have a hard time seeing them losing this game. These are the games that they typically win. And so we'll see. It'll definitely be a good one there. In the next game we're covering here, Missouri's taking on South Carolina. Does Missouri have an answer for the South Carolina defense?
We saw Missouri. Let's say that in this game, Drew Pine plays instead of Brady Cook. We saw the way that looked against Alabama. I would say that South Carolina's defense in this type of scenario would play better than Alabama's against a quarterback like Drew Pine. He played okay last week against Oklahoma, enough to win them the game.
Yeah.
If Brady Cook plays, it could be something different, but it's still a Missouri team that's susceptible to pressure, that if you put pressure on that team, both of those quarterbacks could falter. South Carolina's crushing it right now between the two guys that we talk about way too often, Kyle Kennard, Dylan Stewart.
Absolutely. South Carolina is definitely crushing it right now. And you were talking about the quarterback play between Missouri and South Carolina. And I have to put a spotlight on Lenore Sellers. Starting the season off, he had about 4 interceptions in the first 6 games. Last 4 games, he's had at least 1 touchdown thrown in the air with 3 2-touchdown games. He's really turned it around for this team and helping lead the way on that 3 straight wins for them. So in addition to the super strong defense that is now finally being paired by this offense and Lenore Sellers at quarterback, it really makes it for a tough day for a lot of opponents in the SEC. I would say South Carolina plays some of the most bruising football in the conference, and that's what makes them one of the toughest teams to play.
Yeah, we saw them tough to tackle, tough to bring down, tough to stop with the dual threat running attack. Really, Lenore Sellers passing well too. They're actually from a play calling standpoint, pass heavy over running. It's just the running. You see him scramble, you see him take off. That's some of the things that work for them. I think that they'll keep it on the ground a little bit in this because we know that if Missouri does connect in the air, they have the potential to break out a big play. They have the weapons to do so. Yeah. South Carolina probably wants to keep it on the ground, slow it down. Depending on what happens on Tuesday, this could be a ranked game in the CFP rankings. So there's some pressure here. Both teams are looking at low odds to making the playoffs, but there's still a path for them to be considered. And having a reporter there at the facility on selection day.
It's interesting for South Carolina because there's some common opponents between these two teams, right? South Carolina played Alabama, Missouri played Alabama, South Carolina played them a lot closer. I think that South Carolina has the edge in this game. I don't know if they have it at 11.5 points, but listen, everybody who watched the South Carolina preview last week against Vanderbilt, I'm going to pick South Carolina in this one. Don't you worry. I got them winning 31-24. I think this Missouri offense does find a way to score, but I think South Carolina takes the edge here.
Okay, interesting. Okay, see, I like South Carolina as well. I think that they do it by a little bit more. For those betting out there, South Carolina 7-2 against the spread this season, so they've done well at covering the spread in big games. South Carolina excels in pressure. Alabama did it against this Missouri team, forced a blowout. South Carolina, I think that they win at home kind of easy, 33-13. Okay. If you're Missouri, you need to force South Carolina to be a passing team, and then you might slow them down offensively. But I think the defense from South Carolina is too much.
Yeah, I'm right there with you there. So I do think they win. Different scores for us, but should be a win for South Carolina. Yeah. The next game we're covering here, Texas right now sitting at number 5. We think they're going to go to number 3. Taking on Arkansas. Big rivalry game, brings us back to the Southwest Conference days. Can Texas keep it rolling in Arkansas? And how important is this game for Sam Pittman, and what does it mean for the Arkansas tenure?
Texas in this game, it's a good opportunity for them to continue to build the resume. Arkansas is a team that, as we've talked about them, they could have performed better with the talent that they have. So when you ask the question, what does this game mean to Sam Pittman? I've been looking at odds where he's one of the coaches kind of in the top 5 right now to be the next one on the hot seat, the next one to lose his job. And I think it's a result of what he's done with the level of talent that he has on the field. And it hasn't been performing to the level that they can. Now, there's been some injuries. We can talk a little bit about those for this game. But this game means a lot to him. This would be the one that to seal another season.
Yep.
A loss here, even though they're expected to lose, it's at home. The fans don't want to see that, especially if you get your guys back. I don't know. There's 2 other guys in that building that could take the head coaching spot.
Yeah, and obviously everyone from Arkansas knows Petrino's been a head coach there before as the OC.
Yeah.
And Travis Williams is one of the up-and-coming DCs. We talk about it, quite often here on the new SEC podcast. And it does pose, a bigger threat to the job for Arkansas, knowing you have that talent underneath your head coach. It's tough, tough living in the SEC, right? You talked about the talent in terms of who they have and what it's supposed to mean for winning. Just recruiting well is not enough in this conference. You have to win with the talent around you, and the expectations looking at who they have, Taylor Green and the likes, is why he's in this position. They're sitting at 3-3 in the conference, 5-4 overall. And you have Texas coming in here. Quinn Ewers coming off of a 5-touchdown performance against Florida. This Arkansas defense has shown to give up big passing performances against guys like Garrett Nussmeier. And so I would expect a lot of that to kind of happen again in this game, unless, this defense can turn it around.
Yeah. And the defense right now, like we talked about the injuries, Taylor Green's back at practice, Jaquindon Jackson back at practice, but on defense, Jalen Braxton, cornerback there, he's expected to practice this week, which they sure hope so. When he's been out, they're averaging about 370 yards given up in the air. Now, when you're looking at what this defense needs to do to step up against Texas is a pass-first team. They ran well. Their best running performance was last week against Florida, so they're starting to click a little bit there. Arkansas is pretty good at stopping the run, right?
Yep.
Like their DBs are getting involved in run stuff. They have good linebackers. They're able to stop that. But teams are throwing on them. Like teams, especially as of late, have been throwing on them. And if Texas does what they did like last week against Florida, that's going to be tough to stop if you are Arkansas. Even if you get Braxton back, you have Jaheim Singletary, you have those guys out there playing corner, but they're not keeping up defensively.
Yep, and we saw that against LSU, like we mentioned with Kyrie and Lacey, going for a touchdown or 2. That's going to be the major key for this game. Is not so much what Arkansas can do offensively. Is this defense going to allow them to stay in the game from an offensive perspective with guys like Taylor Green and Jaquindon Jackson coming back? Any final thoughts on this game with Texas and Arkansas? And I just want to make sure I say this: the spread right now is 13.5 and not 9. So
yeah, it could shift. It could shift at some point, depending on when these guys get called. Whether their number gets called to be playing in the game. Once we see the reports come out, Wednesday, Thursday. I think for Arkansas, if Braylon Russell and Jaquindon Jackson are healthy enough to play, or healthy just in general, I don't think that Texas has seen that caliber of running back yet this year at all. Michigan has it there. They didn't bring it out of the stable. But in this one right now, that's going to be the key. If Arkansas can run the ball effectively, they're going to have a hard time throwing it. I think, Texas right now is probably one of the best, if not the best corner in the country. In Jahdae Barron, 36 targets, no touchdowns. They're going to have a hard time throwing the ball. They're going to need to run. But I think that right now, Texas, they're playing for that spot. They're number 3 in the country. They're going to be a tough team to stop if they play anything like they did last week.
Yeah, and this Texas team, it's sometimes hard to get a read on, because you talked about that top corner of the country. This Texas defense is a no-fly zone. They've only allowed 3 passing touchdowns all season, but you then start to look at the opponents they've played against, and you don't see these super strong quarterbacks. But then you also see what they did against Carson Beck. It's supposed to be a top quarterback, locked him up for the most part, even though they still won that game. So we'll see what they can do with Taylor Green and when it comes to this defense. But this Texas defense is really strong, like you mentioned.
Yeah. So, if you're Arkansas, it's important to run the ball. It's also important to pressure the quarterback. That's what Georgia did to beat Texas, was get pressure on the quarterback. They had 7 sacks in that game, consistent pressure. They made Ewers throw close to home. He wasn't getting the ball downfield to his multitude of targets. So, they might struggle to run a little bit against Arkansas. So if you're putting pressure on the quarterback, that puts you in a winning situation. But if you're Texas, you got to spread the wealth, hit all your targets. That's how Ole Miss ran Arkansas down is getting guys out of position. They have talented guys all over the field on Arkansas's defense. Ole Miss got them all out of position. And I think throwing to a bunch of different guys like Ewers did last week is the way to do that.
Yeah, I'm definitely right there with you, right? And using your guys like Matthew Golden in the whole receiving core they pulled in. Obviously they have one of their guys lead the team, but that's not going to be an issue because they have weapons all over, including Gunnar Helmet, tight end. And so it really, again, right now spreads 13.5. What's your final prediction on this game, given the keys you've mentioned for Arkansas and the keys that we both identified for Texas to win this game potentially?
Yeah, I think Texas wins. I'm going to say 30-13. It's a little bit of a big gap there. Depending on when the Arkansas points come, it could start some uncomfortable conversations about Pittman. If it's a game like last week for Texas where they get out big early, there could be some different feelings from the Arkansas fans.
Yeah, I'm gonna say similar score, 42-13. I think Texas is rolling right now. I feel like this offense is on fire. I think it'll be close in the beginning, but Texas has a big second quarter and just blows this thing out of the water. So 42-13, Texas, they cover. So we'll see what goes on in Fayetteville. And so last game for us for the day, 15 LSU in terms of where they're right now in the right now the CFP. New CFP comes out on Tuesday, taking on Florida, heading down to the swamp. SEC East versus SEC West. Original matchup. Now there's no divisions. 55.5 over under, and LSU's favored by 4. So, what are your thoughts on this one?
These two teams are coming off of bad weeks, very bad weeks, both getting, kind of smoked, coming off of some bad games. And right now, LSU has something to prove. They want to get back. They're looking like they're out of the race. There's some low percentage scenarios that could put them back in the playoff. I don't think it will happen for them. But, when we talked about our recap, it's like, what are they necessarily playing for? I think that this LSU team will come out here with something to prove on the road.
Yeah, I think I'm definitely there with you, right? This LSU team is playing for pride. I think they're playing for their head coach. They obviously, I'm not saying that Brian Kelly's job is on the line right now, but I do think they play with a lot of pride for their head coach. And they want to show this country that they're not pretenders, right? They want to show this country that they are a legitimate team. They've had some bad breaks, and they have a quality win in Ole Miss, of course, but against Florida, I think this is an opportunity for LSU to bounce back, for Garrett Nussmeier to have a better game compared to last game, and to show that he can, control the ball, not turn it over, and win in dominant fashion potentially for the LSU team. This is a good opportunity to establish the run as well for them, which is something that has been kind of a weak point.
Yeah, I checked the weather. I checked the weather for the game, and it shouldn't be raining, so no excuses there for LSU and their pass game. It was tough to see last week. He just couldn't get. There was no time for players to get downfield, and he couldn't establish the deeper pass, that mid-range pass that he's been so effective with this year. Florida, will they have that same level of pass rush? That's something that LSU has been so good at withstanding is keeping Nussmeier clean. Last week, it didn't work against Alabama. Now, if Florida can't get home and can't get to him, then I think we see the Nussmeier who can carve up a defense.
Yep. I agree with you there. I think we see a Nussmeier who played, really well against other teams like in Arkansas, where this Florida offense is not able to keep the defense off the field enough. And Nussmeier and this offense is able to, have their way. On the Florida side, we're thinking they're probably going to run with Aiden Warner once again. Watching that game last week, is there, what are there opportunities for improvement that you think are achievable given where he is in his journey in college?
Yeah, he played fine for being a QB3. It was a tough start to the day. But in the second half, he played fine, got some touchdowns there. It was decent quarterbacking compared to expectations, right? They were playing Texas. It's a tough team to play against anyway. Here, LSU's defense, much less stingy. So, yeah, there's room. The rushing attack was good for Florida last week, too. So, even aside from the quarterback, they had Jacoby Jackson and Jaden Baugh. Over 200 yards between the two guys. So there is room that you don't need to necessarily pass at high levels. What Alabama did on the ground against LSU, if you're Florida and you start running the ball,
you might have a game.
You might have a game, right?
Yeah.
And that's depending on what quarterback plays. Like, we're expecting Warner right now, but Lagway's not ruled out. He's day to day. It was just a hamstring strain or sprain. I'm not entirely sure. I think it's a hamstring strain. So he's day to day right now.
Right. And I think that, for Lagway, I would assume that he's looking for that marquee win. So if he can play, I'm sure he's pushing to get into a game like this and be able to have that solidified, qualified win like this type of game for him on his resume. And for Florida, for Florida fans, I'm imagining that of course they want to win, but they understand if it is the third stringer that's going out there, the expectation is at a minimum just to play close.
Yeah. No, and right now Florida's playing with house money a little bit, like from a coaching standpoint too. Like Napier is coming back, unless something crazy happens and they take back their word. But right now he's coming back. Players are coming back with him. From what it looks like, recruits are coming in, so they're playing to play. That's a team that's dangerous, right?
Yeah.
Like especially if they have a quarterback, QB3 comes in, even QB2 in Lagway. They could throw something creative out there because they don't necessarily have anything to lose at the way their season looks. LSU, to expectations, they have a little bit more to play for.
Yep.
But right now, I mean, I'll talk a little bit about Florida's defense because over the last 3 games, they've played some decent teams. They played Texas, they played Georgia, and they played Kentucky. In that 3-game stretch, they're 4th in the nation in interceptions.
Yeah.
LSU is a team that we talked about it. They throw a lot of picks, get a lot of turnovers. So there's an opportunity for Florida to disrupt this LSU offense in the same way. So it could take some pressure off of their offense if the defense can do that, give them short field or keep the game close from that standpoint.
Yeah, definitely a really important point when it comes to this spread being, -4 and what Florida's defense has been able to do against some of these top teams, specifically Texas, like you mentioned, from a defensive standpoint, and of course the other teams they've played. When you think about, just final predictions for this game, LSU, Florida, knowing what we know, the keys for Florida on the defensive side, the keys for them on the offensive side, establishing the run, using guys like Jaden Ball, and then for LSU, kind of getting the run going more, cleaning up the turnovers for Garrett Nussmeier. What's your final prediction?
Yeah, I think LSU is going to take some more shots downfield. I don't want to have like 2 predictions, but if Lagway plays, I think it is a different game. If he does play, I think that Florida wins by 3. I think that they win 27-24. If Warner plays, I do think that LSU wins by 1 score.
Okay, well, I'm gonna go with one blanket prediction. I think that LSU is able to bounce back here. I would think they win by 10. I don't think they win by 1 score. I'm gonna say 31-21 in this game. I think that they're again playing for pride, playing for a good bowl spot at a minimum. And potentially you never know what can happen in terms of the different scenarios in the conference. But I have LSU winning this one in the swamp, 31-21.
All right, see what happens.
We'll see. We'll see. And then, just kind of wrapping it all up around the country, we have some good games we talked about a little bit earlier. From the ACC perspective, right now, I think SMU is sitting in the top 20. They're taking on BC, 3:30 ESPN. Clemson's taking on Pitt. We'll see what happens. Clemson coming off a win against Virginia Tech. Pitt needs this win, of course.
Yeah, Clemson and Pitt now are they probably thought that there was an opportunity for those to be 1 and 2 in the ACC at some point, but now they're at 3 and 4 in the conference. So they're looking at Miami and SMU and trying to find their way in. So this is a big win for either team.
Yeah, definitely could be a big win for either of those teams. I feel like I always look at the ACC schedule and Notre Dame finds themselves on there. They're taking on Virginia, so that should be a win for them. I think that's the story is the same every week. And for Notre Dame, you're still sitting in that top 12. So the way the committee is making it seem, if you win out, you should be good. Unless some of these conference championship games matter more and could bounce a team that doesn't have a championship to win in conference.
Yeah, they don't want to see something happen like they want to see BYU win conference. They don't want to see something happen where you have a BYU team lose or you have like a Texas team lose in the SEC championship because then you're adding more teams in without taking some top dogs out.
Yeah. It's very similar to college basketball bracketology, where like you want the top team in these mid majors to win their conference championship, so that there's not other bid stealers, as they call them, in bracketology. Bringing it back to football, in the Big Ten, they say the top 2 conferences, right? SEC and Big Ten. The closest game I was looking at from what matters and spread was Oregon, Wisconsin. Oregon's going to Camp Randall Stadium, jump around, 14.5-point spread. Dylan Gabriel seems to be unfazed all season. So I can't imagine this one being any different than what we've seen from him this year.
I'll be taking Oregon, 14.5. in this
Yeah.
game for sure. I think that they're strong right now. Tunnel vision, eyes on the end
Yeah.
of the season.
Oh yeah, and if anybody's been watching, Sports Center, ESPN, some of these different media outlets, the Dan Lanning, speech in the locker room, letting his team know that this Michigan team was defeated and just keeping it going. Like they're on a different mission right now for sure. And the other top two dogs in the conference are Penn State, Ohio State. Have to make a point to it, right? Penn State's taking on Purdue, Ohio State's playing Northwestern. Both these games right now have a spread that's 28 points and up. Like
Yeah.
they're not. There's not. These aren't major competitive games, but I mean, maybe that means these teams are just really good.
Yeah, they could be. They could just be really good teams. But then you have someone like, I don't know. It feels like the opposite of Big 12, SEC, where it's a bunch of teams that anyone could beat anyone on any given day. The Big Ten is just top heavy.
Yep.
It's a top heavy conference where you have a lot of teams that aren't competing with the big guys. So yeah, it could be that way where Ohio State and Oregon are just that much better, and Penn State is just that much better. But I don't think so.
Yeah.
I don't think so personally.
Yeah. I totally get it. In the Big 12 and the G5, right? You've talked about these conferences and a couple teams vying for playoff spots. Any games between the G5 or the Big 12 that stand out to you?
There's an opportunity for Boise State here to lose this game. I think that anytime, it's a conference game for them against San Jose State, 2-score favorites, but they are playing on the road. Boise State didn't look super convincing last week against Nevada.
Yep.
So behind their star running back, they play the game a little bit slower when they're in these closer games because they are keeping the ball on the ground a decent bit. That would be a huge one for them and for the rest of the playoff right now, because if Boise State wins the Mountain West, they're going to be clearly the one to go. Now, if Boise State loses this game, wins the Mountain West, is it them? Is it an Army and the American? So them losing a game makes some interesting decisions for the CFP committee when it comes to the G5.
It definitely makes it really interesting. And for people that follow the G5 last year, similar situation, right? SMU won the American Athletic Conference and Liberty won the Conference USA. They were undefeated, but some thought that SMU had a tougher schedule, beating TCU, but I think losing other games in their schedule, nod to Liberty, who was undefeated. So it'll be interesting to see what would happen if a Boise State lost a game like against San Jose State, who's 6-3, but won the conference. Definitely something to watch there from that perspective. When I look at the games for me, that's pretty interesting between the Big 12 and the G5, and we're pairing these, given these the last two conferences we're talking about. It's got to be the Colorado-Utah game. For me, Utah's always played spoiler when it comes to conference championship contenders. And this seems like one of those games. Their backup came in this past week and played a pretty impressive game, at least for the second and third quarter. The AD kind of erupted on the Big 12. He was fined $40K. I think they want to make a statement here against their former Pac-12 foe. So it'll be interesting to see what they do against Shedeur and the Colorado Buffaloes.
Yeah, having to play on the road here could be a tough one for Utah, having to go to Colorado and play. We saw Kansas State do it. So, there's an opportunity for Utah to take this one and shake up the Big 12 even more.
Yeah, definitely. Another one, I think we've talked about it with BYU. Kansas is playing BYU. Kansas, I believe, beat Iowa State last week. Kansas was supposed to be a Big 12 championship contender, extremely big letdown of a season, but they're playing spoiler. And we talk about in this conference, being able to beat each team. Do you think the luck for BYU runs out this week, or what are you thinking?
I think they're due. I think it's very similar to Miami last week. Like, I think they're due to be beat because they're pulling out these games by the skin of their teeth. And, it tells you what Vegas, what the fans, what the lines are saying when they're 3-point favorites at home against a 3-6 team. Like, I'd be interested to see where the CFP puts them tomorrow on Tuesday. But I think that this would be one that BYU would lose or could lose just because Kansas does have that momentum.
Yeah, I could definitely see it. It'll be interesting to see where the CFP puts them. Like you mentioned, I think they'll be top 6 in the CFP. I think at this point, being undefeated, even though they haven't necessarily been winning with style points, if we give the Big 12 the nod of being competitive teams, they might get that top 6 spot. Looking at the G5, the race right now, we talked about Boise State. They're leading the way. Army's on a bye week, but in their same conference, Tulane most recently got ranked in the AP. They're sitting at 6-0 in the conference, 7-2 overall, taking on Navy. Navy's not ranked, but has kind of been one of the top teams in the American. That's a game to watch if you're trying to follow that G5 playoff spot. And then UL Lafayette. Shout out to the Raging Cajuns. Some of the best crackling and boudin out there if you ever find yourself in Lafayette. But in terms of the football they're playing, they're sitting at 8-1. They've won 6 straight. They're taking on South Alabama. They would need, I'm assuming, Boise State to drop a game or two, and for Army to drop a game or two. But they're still they're in that discussion for the spot. They still need a lot to happen though.
Yeah, I think right now, UL Lafayette and Tulane are right around they're right around plus 700 to 1,000 in Vegas right now to make the playoff, which is better than Missouri. Because there are opportunities for teams to lose. sorry, drink. No, but there are opportunities for them to get in, and it is Army does have to play a Notre Dame team, so that would be one dropping in front of them. So there is opportunity for those teams to get in.
Yeah, Army has to play Notre Dame, and then Army also has to play Navy a week after, I think, the conference championship week, which is very interesting. And so, look, Drink's my boy. You always get on me for riding with Missouri, but they're still in it apparently. But
plus 2,500, throw some money on it.
might throw a little something on it. We need absolute chaos for them to get in, but that kind of wraps up the around the country. Some big games in the ACC, big games in the Big Ten, Big 12 and the G5 will definitely be interesting. And then, like we always talk about here, the SEC is the king here on this podcast. And so, thank you everyone for tuning in. Any closing thoughts from you, Hunter?
No, I think we're going to have a good week, and I'm excited for the rankings to come out tomorrow as well, and catch us for the Brackets and Buzz segment that will be coming out following those CFP ranking release.
Absolutely. Game previews, game recaps, and now Bracket and Buzz, a 10 to 20-minute segment just talking about playoffs, the playoff rankings reactions. And so thank you for tuning into the new SEC podcast. Until next time.